Ross, why don't you touch on what you mentioned last week and say, you guys explain how you're going to get more in depth onto it so people can understand. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you got a question about this, 254-697-6633 is the number. You got two awesome attorneys here, and they're not going to cost you a dime, so give us a call.
Well, I was going to talk. I really wanted to get into some of the legal stuff and strategy things that are really cool from looking at it on the inside of the profession wise. But somebody this week told me, "Why is that interesting? What's important about protective orders and what's exciting about this? What is the?
It's kind of boring, isn't it? Ross?
I mean, it's. I don't think so. For me,
it's boring until you need it.
It's boring when you write these things up, no doubt. There's no doubt about that. And it's boring when you have to listen to the same family whining. You know, it's the same story almost every time when they come in, especially for a divorce.
Well,
but
I would suggest that if you're living right, then it's boring.
Okay, point taken.
yeah. Well, I will say that I talk about on here all the time. The biggest problem I feel like all the things that are going on in the world is that the family nucleus is broken down. And this goes directly to the heart of that, in my opinion. I feel like the whole thing, people don't understand. And I don't know your perspective thinking that people have gotten soft, but there's emotional and psychological abuse. There's people take advantage of one another. They use the kids as a pawn to control the other parent. It's a control game, and these emotional abuses really take its toll on the family, and they have a toll on the kids. And I'm glad that Rick is here. Maybe he can elaborate maybe on some of the psychological.
Well, what I was thinking about what you just said was the toll on the kids, I think, exposes itself a lot of times because we're seeing a lot of just out and out violence, and I think that has to do with the fact that children don't value life. And when I say children, I'm talking about youngsters in their 20s and teens that go out and commit violent crimes with guns and, require us to fight back, if you may, because, like you say, the world is a jungle.
But it's also the thing about really, I do think that women and men in general take advantage of the system, and I want to talk about that. But there is a big problem with aggressive behavior in relationships and people not knowing how to deal with it, and people being a whole lot more selfish. But the problem, as far as the children are concerned, is that this is a vicious cycle. You see, you have the psychological abuse going on, and all they're doing is continuing to witness either physical violence or maybe something that never gets put out into the public that's more mental and that controlling type of cruelty, and so they grow up to do these same things, and it just we never get and that's why we have kids that constantly stay on welfare, right? We because it's just a constant cycle. They're just doing what their parents did before them, and nobody's
that cycle. Yeah.
And so this, I mean, I can tell you from practicing ungodly amount of CPS cases my first 2 or 3 years. I wish that some of you people that are listening today would go just on Fridays. On Fridays, go to the courthouse, and on Mondays, and go up there on a CPS day and just sit there for the whole day, and you're gonna see the attorneys just like, I'm just so ready to go. But if you just listen to some of those cases, you're gonna be like, there's an underground culture that a lot of people, I would say, is average, but like I said, I don't know what that really means.
Well, it
who's
seems average on that Monday.
Hey, Troy, how's his voice coming through?
Say it again.
Yes, can you hear me on the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay.
You need to get a little closer to it.
Okay. So I encourage people to come. I mean, we have open courts. It's open court provision in the Constitution. Come to the courts and look and see what's going on in your community. And I think that maybe your eyes will be a little bit more wide open and seeing exactly what Judge Youngblood, bless his heart, has to deal with, right, on a constant, routine basis. And it is a problem. There is a problem because you've got, I mean, I'm not going to obviously quote the studies, but you have excessive irritability, sleep problems, emotional distress, fear of being alone, immature behavior, problems with toilet training, language development, they don't have empathy, there's substance abuse problems, juvenile pregnancy, criminal behavior across the world. Across the world, the statistics are the same, which is what is so crazy to me. You know, we talk about statistics, and I talk about how they can be manipulated, but one thing that really sticks out, and I always talk about the child maltreatment stuff for CPS, and those are manipulated all the time by CPS, but the thing that really gets me is these statistics are pretty consistent across Africa, America, Europe. We to argue about the gun laws and everything, but it is every study that's done, it doesn't matter in what part of the world, they find that kids that grow up in abusive homes have these problems 40 to 50% more likely than anywhere else, and they're all around the same percentage area. They're all around the same percentage area.
Okay, well, if you say that, then you can encapsulate it in saying, how do you solve the abusive problem? What's causing the abusive problems?
Well, okay, so there's in my opinion there's several things, and yes, I don't think that people were any better in the olden days. I think that there was probably still the abuse going on, but the thing about, and it's more to light today because we have all this social media, we have everything that, and people feel more comfortable standing up for themselves. But I think back then people felt more loyal to each other. The family unit still didn't break up because of those things.
You were dependent on survival back then too, right? So the family members had to help each other.
And so that's part. I would not, I would not fully argue with that. I would say that that's probably a lot of that is true, but you had these people that had, and it was a lot of. That's why we have discrimination today, right? You had a class, a group of people, Irish, right, Italian, Black, Mexican, Hispanic, all these people in their group, and so they felt confident about who they were, even though there was bad things going on. Today everybody's alone. Okay, there's not these kinds of strongholds and these ties, community ties and family ties, and like I said, the nucleus that there used to be. And there was a whole lot of bad things that went on back then that are a lot better today. Me and Rick and I talk about this all the time. Where I was saying, the good old days really weren't the good old days. But another thing is, and I always talk about government control. I mean, we've gotten family violence in and of itself, I think, is blown a little bit out of proportion. I talk about this when I did the seminars for the juvenile probation department. Here I talk about why. It's natural, absolutely natural for brothers to fight.
Yeah, that's right.
It's absolutely natural for two kinfolk, and it's because we feel more comfortable with family. It's more private, okay? And I'm not saying it's a good thing, but when you have two young kids, I saw it in Harris County. I saw a kid, 12 years old, gonna have a family violence charge. I mean, it didn't make any sense. I saw a kid, and then it's a family violence, and then he's got a stick. Right, and so he causes somebody to, bleed from their eye, and all of a sudden the district attorney's going after him for a felony, and I'm just like, man, come on.
Okay, but why does it even get out of the house? If you and I are brothers, and I hit you over the head with a stick, and you got a cut on your head, why does it even get out of the house? Why doesn't mom and dad say, hey, go in the backyard and solve this problem, and I'll put some tape on it,
That's because it's an endless cycle, and people, they weren't disciplined properly. And they don't know how to discipline properly.
I wrote this on a piece of paper so I wouldn't forget. How does this come into play? The entitlement attitude, me, me, me. I think that has a lot to do with it too. Everybody's getting offended over something stupid. Whereas before it was no big deal, and because of being offended, it's causing anger, aggression, and harm to one another.
Well, you jumped over my head on that one. I'm not sure what you mean by the entitlement attitude.
It's a me society. It's like I deserve this. You may not have done squat, but you think you deserve it. Whereas back in the day when the family's together, you all help each other out. And nowadays
well, I
you
know
get
when
people.
my brother hit me with a stick, I probably deserved it most of the time.
That's what and you see, I remember, there's no doubt, even in my generation, and think about how far. Not that you old farts, I'm just saying, but
We're a little older than you are, right?
But even from my standpoint, there's things that, gosh, if I think about if kids would have done today what I was doing in high school, that they probably wouldn't be going. I probably wouldn't went to law school. Okay, and so it's and you see kids playing around. I think Rick was telling me, you guys. Remember you were telling me about the poison that you guys were
Oh yeah, arsenic, cotton poison. We just barefooted and with shorts on, pouring it into the poison machine like nothing. No day tomorrow. Hey.
And I have no idea what you're talking about. Explain that.
Arsenic, it's a heavy metal.
Well,
It
I know
causes
what that
all
is,
kind of
yeah.
neurological problems. And we used to spray it over cotton before it was stripped. and the stripper then would beat the leaves out, which
Okay,
we did.
okay, gotcha.
And then today, if CPS found out that if CPS found out your parents were doing that, they'd come after you for child abuse.
Probably so.
I mean, and they'd say you're subjecting this child to a deadly substance, and it's going to cost you. And to some degree, that's right. But it just goes to show that the fashions and the times do change a lot. And I mean, for some degree, it's better.
Do you think CPS has too much control, Ross?
Oh man, I don't.
Well, you are spouting out some good opinions here, so I'm
Yes, I
bomb
believe.
you on that one.
I believe that they do have a tough job, and there's so much turnover in that office. And you already know the cases that I've been on with CPS.
Oh, that's true.
And so I understand that I'm more biased than a lot of attorneys, and so I think that
Well, I did my time in CPS court too, Ross. It was about 20 years before, maybe 30 years before you did yours. And I would suggest that things really haven't changed that much in that 30 years because it was terrible back then just as it is terrible now. But it is a special court, and it is a special place for terrible things.
Well, clarify what you mean by it's a terrible place, because
He means terrible, it's the
of
bad
court.
stuff.
of the cases that come in.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah,
all
there's
the
bad
cases,
stuff.
They're just sad. You look at them and you go, wow, what could be done to fix this? And the bottom line is a lot of social change, just like Ross is talking about, has to happen if we're going to change it. But gosh, it hasn't changed.
And so I'm actually kind of torn from a economist point of view, from an economic point of view. Why not violate the sorry parents' rights and take the kids away because they don't need them? They're not going to help me from an economy standpoint, and so I really don't have that bad of opinion about what goes on. But from an individualist, liberty, passionate person that protects the Constitution, it's like I'm torn.
You know, all lawyers, they go to class and learn about the Constitution, and most of the judges in America are lawyers, and certainly in district court. So I really feel for the judges that have to make those decisions and decide to write on a piece of paper a order that takes a child away from not just his parents, and not just taking the child away from the parents, but also his brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts.
That kind of touches on a question I wanted to ask, and that is, I know that department is necessary because it gets to a certain point where you have to take care of the child. But it seems from my angle and view, which is probably very limited, that every time I hear the bad case about CPS, it was too easy access to make that decision. That's my only glitch here. It seems or appears that at any moment they can come in and grab your kids. Shouldn't there be a solid, firm checklist 1, 2, 3 before it gives the appearance of really easily just getting in there to take the kids away?
Well, I would suggest that maybe the places that you're getting your news from might be a little biased. I mean, if you look at a divorce case and you ask her, then he is a sorry SOB. And if you ask him, then she is something else.
And I understand that. I got no
So,
problems with that, but I'm just saying.
you know,
That's
the
what,
way
as a
court
lawyer,
looks
you're
at
always making somebody mad. You know?
Yeah.
What's the checklist for a court before they go to do that?
Well, you got to look out for the best interest of the child, and that's a really broad term. What is the best interest of the child? Well, we know the best interest of the child is not served if their legs are being broken and their ribs are being crushed and their heads being banged.
And that's an obvious case.
Well, yeah, and I will say that is an obvious case. And of course, the CPS needs to come in and take that child away immediately.
And I totally agree. I was talking about the stuff that's not so obvious.
Well, where do you draw the line on what is not obvious? If the child is fixing to get banged on the head or fixing to get a broken leg, then we obviously need to do something too.
You could say that about any topic. So there's got to be something when it comes to taking somebody's child away. What's the basic top 3 things you're going to look at besides the obvious before somebody can come in and take your kids away? Is there any type of checklist? Like, you know how we were talking about
Yes, they have about a 12 factor checklist.
okay,
but
so there's something in place.
but really, it's all over the board. Those things are not exclusive. I mean, anything can. The judges don't follow that to the T. I've only seen a couple cases do it, but
Well, they are going to list at least one of those 12 things.
That's
And
right.
even though it may be subjective, the judge then gets to look at it, and they're supposed to. I think the law says that we have to look at situations where there's been a report of abuse or suspected abuse.
Okay.
and then you got to realize from the judge's standpoint. A lot of times I would get so mad at the court, right? You know this ain't right. You know that they don't have probable cause to do this, right? But if something happens to that kid, next weekend, the judge's head's on the block, right? And the judge is a political official, right? The judge is going to be responsible, just like all the other judges when they let somebody out and they go and kill somebody again.
So you got the checklist, but the asterisk at the bottom is CYA, right?
No,
I wouldn't say
don't know
that.
about
I wouldn't say. I'm not. I mean, I meant what I said sincerely. Like, I meant the judge is going to err on the caution. Is going to err on the side of caution.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And so, a lot of times,
It's not just to cover his, but it's to take care of the child. I
Yeah.
mean, that's his bottom line, and he's got tough decisions. That's one reason I'm not a judge, because I just don't want to make those kinds of decisions.
and so yes, there are cases. Trust me, where CPS acts completely unreasonable, and I mean they're just out of control. But from a standpoint on a majority by majority, case after case after case, you can't help, you can't blame them, because after you see so many of those cases, just one after another, it's like, who do I believe?
Look, let me make something clear. I'm the devil's advocate here. Okay, I'm the host of the show. I got you guys on. So there's people out there who've got questions that I'm asking, and so I'm asking on their behalf, and it goes both ways. So I want to be clear, everybody. I'm asking these things because on the outside view, especially depending on where you get your information from, you may hear things and you think CPS is nothing but bad, bad, bad. But there's other ways to look at it too. So you got to get both sides of the story.
Certainly, any person that works at CPS, God bless them. I mean, it's not really a sought after job. It's not the kind of job that they're going to go buy their Mercedes with. And they have a stack of files, and all of these files are bad news. I mean, I've often thought about it and want to worship the ground they walk on, because if I had their job, I would just hate society in general.
That's what I'm saying. Like, after you see just case after case after case, it's like you get I feel like I would get brainwashed for sure.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I stopped doing family law. I mean, it's just horrible stuff.
Okay, we sidetracked it from restraining orders into CPS. How does this all wrap up together?
Well, okay, so I mean, a lot of times, I mean, you should not hesitate to get a protective order if you feel like the relationship is getting out of control, right?
Well,
I feel like you
endangered. That's the bottom line,
right? But you can also, from a grandparent standpoint, right? A lot of times there was a Supreme Court case, Troxel versus Granville, and it said a lot of courts interpret this to say that grandparents have no rights. Okay, well, the Attorney General of Texas has been very clear. Okay, the grandparent possession access statute, right, is not unconstitutional on its face, right? I've seen many cases where grandparents step in, right, into a situation that's not ideal from the parents. Maybe the parents don't need their rights terminated, but they're having some problems. Maybe one's doing a little bit of dope, can't really get off of it, but he's not really a bad dad. Mom's kind of just from job to job, and the grandparents step in and sort of pick up that role, and I love that. And when dad's doing something bad, and you feel like that's putting your grandkid at jeopardy, I'm telling these grandparents on the air today, do not fear to jump in and file a protective order or something, because you, as a member of a family member, when you see some kind of family violence or you see something that's not right, and that can include abuse, which would include excessive drug use that may somehow affect the child, and based on the CPS cases, right, that come before Judge Youngblood that say just marijuana smoking, right, could harm the child. I think if you've got drug use in the house, okay, and it's prevalent and it's noticeable, I think you as a grandparent should at least try to step in, right, and jump in and help this family unit get back together. I'm not putting pressure on these people, obviously, but I feel like I commend those grandparents to do that. And so there's more than just a nasty divorce case where we can use protective orders. We can actually use these things, okay, to maintain a status quo, right, so dad can go to Safe P, so dad can go to rehab, or so mom can go and get counseling. I mean, and jump in and get the family back together, right? I know that these orders seem like they push people apart, but if we do it right, it's actually supposed to bring everybody back together. That's the whole point of the code.
Certainly, there's a whole lot more awareness about abuse and its relationship to addiction today because of the opioid situation. My law firm's working with some counties regarding that opioid crisis. And there are a lot of studies out there about how it causes abuse within the family and then costs the counties with regard to extra CPS cases, with extra law enforcement cases. And
Oh, that's right.
that
That's
sort
right.
of stuff is getting in the news so that grandparents should
That's
feel
absolutely
more
right.
comfortable now stepping in, because the truth is when someone is addicted to drugs, they're addicted, and their situation is such that they want drugs. They don't really focus on taking care of the family, which should be their focus.
And so I want to tell you, what does this have to do with restraining orders and things like that? Because I'm not yes, battered woman syndrome exists, right, and the other kidnap syndrome. I just it's evading my mind right now, but
Adults can take care of themselves.
those things do exist, okay, and like I said, there is that psychological warfare that goes on in these relationships. And I've Judge Barry, I've been in front of him a lot on these EPOs, and he's ruled, I can't lie, very, very reasonably and soundly every time, because he realizes there's going to be that blame game going on, even if he lifts the EPO, right? He's like, why did you call the police? Why did you do this? And there'll be that blackmail kind of guilt, even if he lets them go back in. Maybe there wasn't really a good basis for that, but he knows that he's not going to help anybody to let the parent go right back into the home right that quick, because it's only going to cause animosity. Okay, but I wanted to say this.
Even if both parties want it.
Right,
Or
even
say
yeah, they say they want it anyway. Okay, but 146 women were killed by male intimate partners in 2016. 146 in Texas. Okay, last year, and that's a 7.6% decrease in intimate partner homicides from the 158 count of 2015. Okay, and we spoke about. I don't necessarily buy all of the DPSs and the FBI statistics, okay, and they're skewed, especially from the stuff that they don't count, like self-defense cases. They don't count that. But what I do believe is absolutely true is, unquestionably, more violence and more deaths occur in the home than anywhere else. Without a doubt, that is a true statistic, and it's by a large margin.
Why is it? Because of emotional connection, when the emotions get elevated as compared to somebody just robbing a place and it goes bad?
Well, you're passionate. Passions
That's what I mean.
fly.
Passion.
You feel more comfortable with this
Familiarity,
person.
I mean, you spend a lot more hours there than you do, say, somewhere else, like church, where you
Right.
should be spending more time, but
Yeah.
you're still not going to be spending as much time as you do in the home.
And you're not, you're in the cover. You're not in the public eye, and so people. Yeah, the people take all the stress of today, and stress is that's been kind of debunked as far as family violence is concerned. But I feel like people are going to take everything and hold it in and wait till they get home and take it out on somebody.
Okay, so I'm a fixer, man. I'm a fixer. So you got all this evidence and proof and documentation, everything you guys are saying, and it all boils down to each individual. What's causing all of us to get like this? You said it's a breakdown of the family, which I totally agree. It's a major part of it. But what else? Is there anything else we can try and fix? Or
Yeah.
promote
So
or make aware
I
of?
feel like there's a instead of trying to just punish people and
Exactly.
take away their weapons and say that they got to do all this stuff for a family violence case, I think we need a lot more education. I think the children. Even I don't know why we're so worried about punishing. We've already shown throughout the history of time, even from Europe and Great Britain, that the more you push somebody and you punish somebody, right, the more that they're going to resist. Okay, and I understand that rational beings, right, from a standpoint of the higher the crime, the more deterrence. Yeah, that comes to some degree. But after there's so much deterrence, and if there's so much punishment, right, people are going to feel like they have no out. I think if we start from the kids, instead of concentrating so much on the adults, and start focusing on the kids, right, and to maybe have teachers be more involved, have them more involved in school activities, maybe have more private fundraisers, the private donations, so to speak, to give back to maybe get these kids counseling, maybe to get these kids feel like they have attention, they have love, they have a place that they belong to, that they have a loyalty, so to speak. There's some community ties, right? I feel like that's why a place like Cameron, right, doesn't have as many as these problems. Like Cameron actually wasn't one of the counties from 2009 that had a woman, a female, dies an intimate partner, a homicide. I mean, Falls County was one. Right? I mean, we're surrounded by them, and I feel like this was it's places like this that have strong community ties and build people up. I'm not one of those that think it takes a community to raise a child, but I do think that, having something that kid can cling to and say and be proud of.
Well, these days, Ross, what you're talking about costs money, and every time something comes up that's going to cost money, the voters vote it down. So we need to look at that. And I'm not saying we just got to throw money at every problem to fix it.
Yeah, I get that.
But when you have teachers that are making as low of wages as they are, where they're within the poverty level, you can't ask them to spend more and more and more time. So we need to think about funding these things, and it's been advocated all along, Ross. But people like us that agree with that, we need to push that. And I appreciate you saying it, because it needs to be done.
I don't know, even though it has to be from a government standpoint. I'm just saying, I wish people would get more involved and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you're listening today, go to the CPS court one time and just listen to what goes on in there. I think you'll be more apt, even if you're not a Christian, whatever. I think you're going to be more apt to say, okay, let's go and try to help some of these kids, because they're just eating my tax dollars up.
Hey, right.
All you're doing is paying more money into the system when they don't figure out how to grow up, right, and they don't figure out how to cope with the real world.
So as Barney Fife might say, we got to nip it in the bud, right?
Well, I want to end with this. I think I think some of the biggest victims of domestic violence are the smallest. Okay, that's the whole point of today. That some of the biggest victims of domestic violence are the smallest.
Well, that would make total sense. I mean, the ones who can't take control of the situation or defend themselves. I'm sitting back here. I mean, we're filming this. It's gonna be on YouTube on Tuesday, and I'm just looking at the screen, and I'm seeing how I'm sitting back, and I'm turning my head back and forth, listening to each one of these guys, and thinking to myself, man, it appears hopeless. It's gotten to this point where it's like, how do you turn this thing around? And you made this comment about how Milam County hasn't had one of those incidents, because I believe real fast analysis would be smaller population. Smaller towns, people know each other more, as compared to a larger community that has transient society where people are coming from all over the place, and you don't get to know your neighbor.
Exactly, you have no ties.
No ties.
And there's no family unit, so there is nothing anymore. I mean, that's the problem.
So get to know your neighbors, I guess. Know your family first, know yourself, know your family. And
some of you probably know me a little too well.
All right, guys, we got about a minute. How do you want to close this up? Anything else you want to say? Because I'll make sure you tell everybody how to get a hold of y'all. But let's wrap this up, Ross. And
well, as far as this kind of law goes, the restraining orders, it's such a specialty that you really need to contact an attorney that does a lot of it, like Ross. My firm doesn't do any of that stuff. So I know a lot about it because I did it 30-something years ago, and I didn't like it. Because
Rick doesn't get his boots dirty anymore.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it boots dirty. It just
he gets his boots polished, right?
But it just seems hopeless, and when you work on something that seems hopeless, it
Welcome to criminal
degenerates
defense.
it degenerates your enthusiasm, I guess, for your work. And I love what I do, and I love to see Ross enjoying what he does. And Ross, I haven't been to CPS court, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to go check it out and see what happens. And just sort of rejuvenate my.
Can anybody go
I
to
bet
that?
you leave early.
Would you advise, or could anybody go there? Would you advise somebody to go look at that to see what the heck can happen?
It's a public process. It's open to the public. Anybody can go and check it out and listen. I'm sure that if there's a little break, they could probably even go up and ask one of the attorneys involved what's going on here if they didn't understand it, and probably get a little bit of insight. The judge probably would tell them if they asked him even what was going on. But it would be interesting. You learn a lot and see a lot of stuff. It's not all good. In fact, none of it's good.
And I mean, I'd say it wasn't even in a CPS case. Michelle Lemkill, family law specialist from Rockdale, love her to death, great attorney, had a jury trial with her on child custody case. And I mean, that was just like one of the hardest things I ever had to do. And mainly it was because we had to get a little 6-year-old girl up there and just bawling her eyes out, and being forced by these nasty attorneys to tell on her parents. And that was just psychologically, I mean, horrible for that little girl. And so if you guys would see that, you would think twice about breaking off a relationship that, I mean, you would think twice about getting with somebody too. You would want to make sure that if you were going to get with somebody, you weren't going to just tear the family apart, like what we saw in the court that day.
Ross, how can everybody get a hold of you?
105 East Main Street. I'm here in Cameron, Texas. You can call me in Houston or Bryan, College Station for an appointment. As well, you can email me at benton@watson.legal. That's benton@watson.legal, 254-605-4140, 254-605-4140.
And Rick, I can't thank you enough for sponsoring the segment here. Why don't you tell everybody how they get a hold of you? Copley with Dodd Krebs Law Firm.
Well, we have an office at 312 South Houston here in Cameron. We have an office in Temple, Conroe, and Austin. And you can go on the web at respectforyou.com.
You guys are nationwide.
Send us a little note on the web, and we'll respond to you and let you know what we can do for you.
All right, gentlemen, as always, it's incredible 25 minutes here. So, ladies and gentlemen, this YouTube video will be up probably, like I said, Monday or Tuesday. Check it out. You can review all the other ones there at Aaron's Gun Shop YouTube channel. Guys, thanks a lot for coming on. And Trey, let's take a break. When we come back,